Dr. Weiner, I'm a 53-year-old female who has struggled with her weight since very young, 4 or 5 years old probably. And finally, in 2008, at a weight of 279, I got a gastric band. Over the next 3 or 4 years, I lost down to about 202 pounds, and my weight stagnated there and over several years' time. A couple of years ago, I became a vegan, and so I don't eat very many processed foods at all. And over the next 7 months, I lost about 40 pounds, which was great. And on my way to becoming healthy, I decided to quit smoking also. And noticed that my weight loss stopped, which I was okay with. But I was having a lot of issues with my band and was told that I needed to have it removed. In the meantime, my doctor took out the fluid in my band, and over the past 8 months, I've put on about 15 pounds. My current weight is 180. And I've been following, a really healthy diet, and yet I have no weight loss. I'm actually gaining, just due to eating a larger amount of food without the restriction. And so I'm considering having a gastric sleeve, and I'm wondering if you think that will help me, considering the situation I find myself in. I'd appreciate your input. Thanks.
Okay, a lot to unpack here. So just to summarize, we have a 53-year-old woman who in 2008 underwent a gastric band, lap band, realized band, whatever it was, that really isn't important. And they started at 279 pounds, and they dropped down, it looks like about 77 pounds to a weight of 202, and they kind of stayed there. So it took about 3 years to get down, and we did see this with the lap band, that the weight loss was much slower than it is with the sleeve or gastric bypass. And they stayed there for a couple years until they became a vegan. They lost another 40 pounds, I'm assuming probably to around 160 at that point. And then they quit smoking and the weight loss stopped. So there's a lot of really important information already here. So the first thing is we saw 77 pounds of weight loss from a band. That's pretty good. Generally 40, 50, 60 pounds is what most people saw. We had a small group of people who lost a ton of weight, and the band was amazing for them. We also had a pretty decent sized group of people who lost like 20 pounds or less and then regained it over a short period of time, really essentially had no weight loss from the band. We don't know why people would be in one of these three groups. And then we also know that over time, bands become tight. People start having problems with heartburn, with frequent vomiting. They need to be reoperated on. They need to be adjusted. And a lot of people who have a band in vomit very frequently. This is not part of bariatric surgery. This is a problem and it needs to be addressed. It sounds like she had a number of these problems and had to have some fluid removed, which resulted in some weight gain. So I think there's two really important points here. The first is quitting smoking causes weight gain or causes weight loss to stop. That doesn't mean you shouldn't quit smoking. You have to quit smoking because it's just not a behavior that you can continue and be in good health. But it does show you that tobacco lowers your set point, causes weight loss, and as soon as you stop smoking, we see weight gain. We think, oh, it's because you're orally fixated and you turn to food instead of smoking. We always psychologize things, but really what it is that inhaled cigarette smoke causes an injury to the stomach mucosa and somehow triggers some of the same effects probably that weight loss surgery does by changing this hormonal state that regulates how you store fat. And once you remove that toxin, the body heals and the weight comes back on. It's important when you quit smoking that you understand that it's going to impact your weight. It doesn't mean you should start up again. It just means we have to make plans, perhaps with medications or, in this case, an aggressive diet adjustment to counteract the weight loss. The weight gain from quitting smoking. So she then had fluid removed, which is what you have to do when people have severe heartburn after these surgeries. And then the weight has started to go back up. And now she's 180 pounds. She didn't list her height, but I'm guessing she barely qualifies, if she qualifies at all, for bariatric surgery. And so the first question I have for her is, how is this going to be paid for? Because I could see this one running into a lot of trouble with the insurance companies and being denied. So I think before you kind of go down too far toward any road, especially if that road is complete band removal, you have to understand what's going to happen with your band removal. You're going to have to understand what's going to happen with the insurance company. So you really have kind of two possibilities here. Ideally, my preference, and I think most surgeons' preference, is to remove the band and do another surgery. And I absolutely think that this person should have another surgery. And I think she's very much on the right track with the sleeve based on her BMI. I think that seems like a very reasonable choice. She would need to have an endoscopy to make sure she doesn't have something called Barrett's esophagus. Barrett's esophagus is when the very bottom part of the esophagus starts to change. The lining changes from normal esophageal cells to something that really resembles intestinal cells, and that's a precancerous condition, and that generally means no sleeve. So she would need to have an endoscopy to make sure she doesn't have Barrett's esophagus. It's a little tricky when people already have a band in, because the band, it could be causing the Barrett's, and removing the band will help. It's very complicated. But in general, even with a band in, if you have Barrett's, most surgeons would discourage you from having a sleeve gastrectomy. And instead, you would have to have a gastric bypass, which is also kind of a whole other ball of wax, especially in someone with a history of smoking, and us knowing that the recidivism rate for quitting smoking is not 0%. People do start smoking again. So I do think she should have this surgery. I think she has to look at her insurance options very carefully, because she may not qualify. She may, and this is terrible, it's nothing that I ever encourage with my patients, but this is the world we live in. She may have to gain weight in order to qualify for the surgery that she absolutely needs. I think that's probably going to happen naturally, because her band will auto-tighten and will have to have fluid removed. But I think that's another point that you really have to consider. So I think the best thing for this person to do is find a bariatric surgeon that she trusts and work through all of the complexities of this case. But this is a perfect example of how obesity is a very complicated disease. And there are things beyond what we eat and the way we exercise that drive weight loss or cause weight gain. And you have to take a step back, become kind of an impartial jury here, and start to look beyond just your own personal failings in managing your diet and your exercise, and instead really look at the details. She's done a great job kind of presenting all of these things. I think she does have some sense of that. But this is not an easy case, and definitely needs a lot of thought.